Are you the quantum mechanics?
Yes, we are the quantum mechanics.
Also known as the justified ancients of woo-woo.
If you're interested in the paranormal and the high strangeness, we're the podcast for you.
Whether you're a believer, a doubter, or somewhere in between.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Peter.
And we are the Quantum Mechanics. And somebody has joined us this week as a Patreon. Thank you very much. The enigmatically named RR. We've been guessing what that stands for. Can't really imagine, but I like it.
Maybe they're a pirate.
What did he say? Is an R and an R? I don't know. I love it though. It's kind of, you know, when you can just go by two letters, you kind of got an enigmatic sort of thing. You know, like is JD Vance? Has he started a trend? Maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, let's leave that behind. Thank you, RR. Please join us.
Yes,
everybody else, patreon.com/TQM pod. But before all that, what have we got this week?
Well, Ben, I want to combine two of my personal obsessions into one episode.
Okay. Haunted KFC.
Well, the first one is the paranormal.
Of course.
It's a given, right?
Given.
But I'm also a little obsessed with watches.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I say I'm obsessed with watches. In reality, it's more a kind of browsing online and looking in shop windows rather than collecting watches, because, you know, that can lead to you having to sell your liver and kidneys. Can you sell your liver? You can only sell your kidneys, can't you?
I think you can only sell your...
Well, either way, you're going to need to remortgage your house if you do get into this
They're surprisingly expensive, aren't they?
Yes. Well, it depends. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of watches at different prices, but when you get to the real high-end collector stuff, they are quite expensive, as we will find out in this episode.
I was gutted to find that in the early 80s, so people of us that age will remember, there was a constant stream of Casio and Timex watches with games on.
Right.
And there was always somebody in school who had the one you wanted, but they weren't very expensive. You could get them from Argos and they were sort of worthy of like 2 or 3 weeks pocket money. You know, it was $7.99, $8.99. I had a Space Invaders one, and the very same one that I had, I saw it on eBay for $2,500. Admittedly, it was still in its original packing, but $2,500. I mean,
that's incredible.
That just got lost in a school desk somewhere. Yeah,
those Casio things, like some of the older G-Shock stuff like that. I was talking to my partner about it because I had a kind of bright orange G-Shock, and I never throw things like watches away. And I can't find it anywhere. So that's another hunt we've got to go, because if it still works, that would be... I mean, obviously, I've not got the box and all that stuff, but it still must be worth something. So, yeah, I want to do stuff about watches and clocks. We often talk about the concept of time on the podcast, time not working in the way we think it does, in a non-linear rather than linear way. And I just find it really interesting that watches' main function is to reflect time really in a linear way. That's what it's there for. So let's bring all this together. We're going to look at pieces that have got a connection to the paranormal, haunted horology, weird watches. That's what we're going to look at today.
I love the use of horology.
Yes, it's a great word, isn't it?
It is. It goes with campanology.
Yeah. Well, coming up, we have watches that are cursed, watches that are haunted, potentially clocks that are possessed, and we have some horology pieces that have literally saved people's lives. So we've got all that to come. But before we get into the high strangeness, Ben, should we have some random facts about watches?
I've hit the bed.
You've hit the bed. Now, it is said that for us horologophiles, watch enthusiasts, this can be an expensive hobby, as I mentioned earlier, as highlighted by the most expensive watch ever sold. It's a one-off design by Patek Philippe of a watch range called the Grandmaster Chime. This one-off version was created specifically for a charity auction. How much do you think it sold for, Ben?
I don't know.
You've seen a picture of it?
I've seen a picture of it. I mean, what, like maybe well, watches go for a lot, don't they? Maybe 250,000.
Okay.
Pounds.
All right, £250,000. Well, the watch sold for $31.19 million.
Oh, I was nearly right.
In 2019.
What? I mean, okay, fine.
One-off collectible, I guess. It's very complex in what it does. It's got all kind of what we call complications on it. So it does all kinds of stuff. So that helps it. Now, I did find a version of this style of Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime that has emeralds and diamonds set into it, which the one I was just talking about didn't. It has an incredible asking price of £80 million. Now, I did find this watch on a website that's selling it. Good news, Ben. You get free delivery in the UK, which I just thought was hilarious when it was like add to basket. I thought, okay.
I thought it was going to be one of those you could do a Klarna pay in 3.
Can you imagine just dropping that in your online basket? Yeah, 80 mil, fine. Do you take PayPal? It's just incredible, isn't it?
It honestly ridiculous. I mean, even if you're Jeff Bezos, do you buy an £80 million watch? Because, well, I grew up in a farming community, and you know when people have got money, when they drive a Subaru that's 25 years old and every jumper has got a hole in it, because rich people don't tend to invest in, you know, flim-flam. And that's it, frippery. But it does seem like a watch would be frippery. But, you know, that's just my opinion, obviously.
Well,
wow.
The second most expensive wristwatch ever sold was a Rolex Daytona that was once owned by Hollywood icon Paul Newman.
Oh, that would be quite cool.
It was a gift from his wife and had the words "Drive carefully" engraved on it. It sold for nearly $18 million in 2017.
It's probably covered in salad dressing.
Ben, have you ever noticed that watch adverts always show the time on the watch as 10 minutes past 10?
I had known that, yes. And I was always told it was like... it was supposed to represent a lovely lady's legs. That was the way that it was described by advertisers. It was kind of like... It made people think of long, shapely legs.
I hadn't heard that. Well, the answer that I found is that it looks like a happy face.
Oh, well, that's a much better reason.
So it's got a subconscious appeal to us, so we're more likely to buy it.
Oh, okay. So you sort of start seeing pareidolia and you start seeing...
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now, we briefly mentioned some of the weirdness and uncertainty of the nature of time, so it is maybe no surprise that one of history's most famous and influential physicists, the man who changed the way we look at time, Albert Einstein, was an avid watch collector. He owned a number of Longines pocket watches and wristwatches, as well as a Patek Philippe pocket watch. So he had very nice, very good taste, mainly in pocket watches rather than wristwatches.
It's amazing what an equation will buy you.
Yeah, there you go. The most favoured watch by astronauts was the Omega Speedmaster. Now, Neil Armstrong wore one for the moon landing, but then at the last minute he had to leave it in the lunar module as a backup for a malfunctioning electronic timer.
Oh, no.
So, in fact, Buzz Aldrin was the first man to wear a watch on the moon, which I love that story. After his return to Earth, Aldrin sent the watch to the Smithsonian Museum to be displayed, but it got, quote-unquote, lost en route and was never been found again.
Someone's got that, haven't they?
Yeah, so if you have a vintage Omega Speedmaster in your collection with a reference number, ST105.012, and that has an engraving on the back that says NASA number 43, you may possibly have the first watch to be worn on the lunar surface.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that would be cool if you did.
Yeah, it'd be good to come across that. And you mentioned them earlier, I'll just throw this one in as well. In terms of sales, the honour of the most popular watches goes to Casio. Their digital Casio F91W and G-Shock watches combined selling over 200 million units.
Yeah. Does not surprise me. I've got at least 5.
Yeah, I'm sure I've got a couple up there. So there are my random facts.
Oh, very good. Thank you. I enjoyed those.
They were random, so I felt they did well. Now, we're going to get into some tales of haunted watches soon, but let's start by exploring a genre of early watch known as the memento mori. So these are also known as skull watches. They're early timepieces in the form of a pocket watch. Sometimes they were worn as a piece of jewellery. They're crafted in the macabre shape of a human skull. Now, the Latin memento mori translates to remember you must die. Which does sound a bit macabre, doesn't it? It does give you a little clue to their purpose. Not that they kill you. They are meant to be a reminder to the owner that life is fleeting, So you must embrace the short time you have on this planet and live a good life. Which makes sense.
It does.
And different objects have embraced this theme that illustrates we will all die, but the watch versions of Memento Mori particularly resonated, as you can literally see your time ticking away.
I suppose in terms of what I was talking about earlier and the kudos you get in the classroom, that would have scored more kudos maybe than a Space Invaders watch.
It would. And I mean, you've
got a skull.
I've showed you a picture of them. They're amazing looking things.
They are, yeah.
Now, this type of skull pocket watch became fashionable in Europe in the 16th and 17th century, and one of the most significant skull watches of the period belonged to Mary Queen of Scots, slightly earlier than that period. Hers was an elaborate engraved silver skull watch made by French watchmaker J. Moissan of Blois. It was covered with scenes depicting various biblical events. It had the fall of Adam and Eve, the salvation of man, the crucifixion, and time devouring all things. Each tableau was accompanied by poetic verse. Engraved on the forehead of the skull was a skeletal figure of death with a scythe in one hand and an hourglass in the other. The hinged jaw of the skull opened to reveal the movement inside that had a number of small hammers inside it to strike the hours. So it chimed as well.
Very intricate.
Really intricate, right? It's funny because I couldn't find a picture of it, but I've seen some artists' impressions of the design. It is incredible. We'll put some of that on social media on our Facebook so you can have a look. Now, the emblem on the watch of the Grim Reaper, scythe in hand, was to take on a macabre significance. It is claimed that Mary Queen of Scots gazed upon her watch just before she was beheaded in 1587. The watch then mysteriously stopped at the exact moment of her beheading.
See, there's a whole list of... So that is a trope, isn't it? The watch stops
I'm
when
going to come
owner...
on to more later.
Right, okay.
Now, the skull timepiece then, it seems, became haunted with the spirit of Queen Mary, Mary Queen of Scots. When it was repaired after her execution, it would intermittently halt at the same minute as her execution. Now, there is...
Is that verified or just
there is a
legend?
little issue that I kind of picked out. Nobody I've read different versions of this story, and nobody's really picked up on this, but I thought I'd do some research. And at least one part of the story I find a little bit hard to believe, because minute hands were only added to watches in the late 1600s.
Right, okay.
So Mary, Queen of Scots' Memento Mori only had an hour hand.
Right. So it's still possible that it stopped, but...
On the hour rather than on the minute. So it could be, just, people using a turn of phrase. But, it's really uncertain whether that is a kind of shaggy dog story or whether it really happened.
Do we still have that watch, or is it lost?
I've seen photos online, but I don't know if they're replicas. But I've certainly seen the original artwork for the design, which looks incredible. Yeah. And if you want to know, Ben, because I carried on my research, it wasn't until the 1700s that second hands started to appear on timepieces.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Well, the Memento Mori trend did die out, if you excuse the pun, but modern-day watchmakers have re-embraced the concept, with brands like Bell and Ross and Richard Mille introducing a new batch of skull-based Memento Mori-style watches. If you want a reminder, Ben, on your wrist that we are all going to die, you can pick up a Richard Mille skull watch for just over £1 million.
No, you see, what I've done is build it into my knees. So every time I stand up, I'm reminded.
It's a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
Now, Mary Queen of Scots is not the only historical figure whose watch or clock stopped when they died. As you mentioned, Ben, it's become a bit of a trope. Other notable cases include Abraham Lincoln, who was assassinated in 1865. It is claimed that a clock in the room where he finally died stopped at the exact time of his death at 7:12 a.m. Abe, though, is pretty much associated with every type of paranormal phenomenon in the world, isn't he? We've had him as a doppelganger, a ghost, all kinds of stuff. So
Yeah. I had him coming through a Ouija board in a store the other day.
Right, yeah. He's very busy. Similarly, there are claims that a clock in the home of Thomas Edison stopped at the time of his death in 1931. But I think Rudolph Valentino the silent film star who died in 1926, he really takes the biscuit. Not only did his watch stop at the instant he died, but the phenomena then seemed to spread, Ben. Multiple newspapers and fans reported that clocks in the homes of grieving admirers mysteriously also stopped at the same time.
Really? Oh, that's very interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
But because the news wouldn't have spread that quickly. So
Yeah.
does that mean that it stopped and then they read in the newspaper that he died and went, oh, that's what it was then?
Don't know.
Oh, that's
really
interesting.
interesting. Yeah. Yes, because otherwise you could argue it could be kind of energy transfer of the grief. But if they didn't know...
if they didn't know,
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, another multiple watch stopping event relates to the Titanic. Several sources claim that clocks on board the ship and watches recovered from victims of the disaster all stopped at 2:20 a.m. Although, Ben, rather than anything paranormal, this seems more likely that the watches stopped due to water damage.
I was going to say they weren't waterproof, but yeah.
And in terms of the clocks, they must have been big kind of mechanical machines. The thing had hit an iceberg and was flailing around all over the place and sinking. So I don't think it's a particular shock that there's been mechanical damage, due to that reason.
Not really, no.
But it must be a little... It's more kind of... would look like high strangeness, wouldn't it? But actually, when you think of it logically, it does make sense. Another stopped watch legend has grown up around the shooting of the outlaw known as Billy the Kid. The legend goes that his watch stopped at the time of his death when he was killed in 1881. Now, the man who shot him, Pat Garrett, showed the broken watch to prove the time of death, apparently.
Oh.
Well, given that Billy the Kid had a bit of a penchant for stealing and keeping other people's watches, it's not surprising that many collectors over the years have claimed that their vintage watch once belonged to the outlaw. Apparently, people go into pawn shops and all kinds of places.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, no, I've got Billy the Kid's watch. So yeah. It's probably the most tried to be sold watch in history, I would think. Certainly
not Billy the Kid, David King Jensen, sorry.
Yeah. Shall we get some stories of haunted or cursed watches, Ben?
Yes, a cursed watch is one of my favourite stories.
Shall we start with a story about a cursed Rolex that was sold on eBay? This was reported by Peterborough Telegraph in 2016. The watch in question was a black dial Rolex Perpetual Date. Now, normally when a Rolex is being sold on an auction site, you have to be a bit wary about it being a fake. Rolex produce around 1 million watches a year at the moment, but historically they've not produced that many. Yet it's estimated there are approximately 25 million fake Rolexes on sale.
That doesn't surprise me.
So I'd probably either double or twice as many, 3 times as many even, the amount that have ever been made are up for sale. So you have to be very, very careful. But this particular watch was not a fake, Ben. Something much more scary was going on. I'll pick up the story from the article. A Cambridgeshire man is looking to sell his Rolex watch on auction website eBay. There's just one catch. It's cursed. Colin Bryce put the watch up for sale after it brought him a run of bad luck. In his eBay advert, he truthfully reveals a catalogue of misfortunes that befell him 2 months after buying the watch. Colin from Parson Drove near Wisbeach wrote, I must inform interested bidders that this watch may have broken a mirror by hitting it with a black cat. I am quite sure that it is cursed.
Wait, hang on. So,
it took me a while.
So the black...
He's just trying to put cliches of what things that bring you bad luck.
Oh, okay, fine.
So yeah, coming across a black cat and a broken mirror, both bad luck.
I thought he was trying to say that he'd put the watch on his cat and the cat had hit it on... Right, okay, I'm taking it too literally.
It took me a couple of readings as well, but no, I think he's saying, it's got as much luck as if it broke a mirror by hitting it with a black cat.
This was not an advert for autists.
No.
Right.
Within 2 months of purchasing this pretty but evil instrument of horology, I have been involved in a head-on collision that left me with a shattered hip and pelvis, broken ankle, broken fingers, and a brain contusion. Not to mention a 3 Series BMW that now measures only 2.5 series in length.
Oh, no. You see, there are so many of these watches that cause car accidents.
Yeah. After a week in the hospital in which I was pinned back together and left with Meccano holding my right leg on, I was released home and once again placed the fated watch on my wrist. Within a week, I was back in hospital with sepsis. I stayed there for nearly 2 months, undergoing a further 5 operations, eating terrible food and watching terrible daytime TV. I wish I'd bought a Seiko.
Now, either this guy is quite good at writing, or he's one of those people that will sit down next to you in the pub and really annoy you.
Yeah.
I can't work out which one it is.
Yeah, it goes on in this. This is all in the advert. He adds, I hope that its curse ends with me and it brings its next owner nothing but smiles, happiness and marshmallows, but you have been properly warned. Now, following the coverage by the media, the article says, so this is at the time of writing, 2016, there were more than 5,000 views on the eBay advert, and the bidding has already gone £100 over what Colin had originally paid for the Rolex, and what he hoped to get back by selling the watch. He added, I had originally suggested that rather than make fake bids, amused readers make a donation to the local air ambulance, and I have received several messages from people who have done so. But given the coverage that the story has now achieved, I thought I should do more. So I've decided to split the profits between the Magpas Air Ambulance, as the air ambulance had a big part of my story, I'm assuming he was airlifted with one, and Kidney Research UK, as our daughter was born last July with chronic kidney disease. Well, Ben.
All right, he's a good guy, but so he did sell it.
He did sell it, so I thought, because that article, he hadn't sold it at that point, so I did a bit of follow-up research. He, in the end, he did sell the watch for £2,000. That's 500 more than he originally paid for it. He did donate to the 2 charitable causes he mentioned, and the new owner has not reported any disasters. So it looks like the curse was broken.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That is good. Although sometimes I think what you get with those curses is obviously it's just not really a curse, it's a coincidence. But if you take it from the paranormal stance, I have come across cases where an object has kind of acted like a lens and taken somebody's sort of... They've had bad luck that has been imposed upon them by a dark spirit, something like that. And then something has been the aerial or the lens which has pushed it out into the world.
Yeah.
I don't know what truth there is in that. That is just something that I have read about.
I also thought, I mean, yeah, I think it's probably a way of him humorously selling the watch. But,
yes.
Yeah, I mean... It wasn't really lots of examples of bad luck for him, really. He was in a car accident and then he was released from hospital and got sepsis. That happens to people. So it wasn't like it was a completely separate incident. So you could argue, he could quite have easily have said, I had a cursed BMW 3 Series, couldn't he?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's go. My next story involves a man who bought an antique watch but also gained an unlikely guardian angel, man. They write, Haunted Vintage Watch, please tell me what to do. I wanted to share something that's been haunting and oddly protecting me since I bought a vintage Ricard R61 automatic watch from a quaint antique shop near JJ Hospital in Mumbai, India. I've always been fascinated by old mechanical watches and their history, but I never expected to encounter something like this. I picked up the watch from a seller who restores vintage timepieces from bulk lots. The Ricard R61 immediately caught my eye. It had a square case, a day-date complication, and a worn but timeless charm. I didn't think much of its history then, though the seller mentioned that the watches he acquires often come from estates, or as he vaguely put it, from lives now past. The first night I wore it to bed, and I had the most vivid dream of my life. I was in what looked like a smoky disco in the late 70s or early 80s. Mirrored ceilings, strobe lights, and polyester suits. Among the crowd I saw a man in a white polyester suit with a deep maroon shirt, the collar spread wide. He exuded charisma, but carried an air of danger. I don't know how you get that from a dream, but obviously he did. Suddenly chaos erupted, gunshots rang out, and I saw him clutch his chest and fall to the ground, blood pooling around him. It was a mass shootout, AK-47s burping everywhere.
Flipping heck.
I woke up in a cold sweat. I thought it was just a weird coincidence, but the dream repeated almost every night I wore the watch to bed. I I don't know if you wear a watch. I don't wear my watch to bed, but okay.
A, I don't wear a watch, and B, don't wear it to bed, because if you do wear a watch, it gets all icky underneath. You've got to shower, and well.
Anyway, he said, each time I saw the same man in his dream, and I realised I was somehow viewing his final moments. What's strange is that despite the haunting imagery, the watch seems to have brought me good fortune. A week after I got it, I narrowly avoided a serious accident. I was crossing the road when something told me to step back, just as a speeding car jumped the signals. Another time, I aced a crucial test that I thought I'd bombed. There's been a series of small but significant events since owning this watch that have worked out in my favour. I began to suspect the man I see in my dreams isn't just anyone. He's the original owner of the watch, and somehow he's acting as a guardian soul. I did some digging into Mumbai's history and learned that the disco area in the city was often tied to organised crime. Gangsters frequently hang out at such places, and shootouts weren't unheard of. After researching and identifying the year and make, 1972, only one major shootout at a discotheque in Bombay took place where a gangster died. Here's where it gets weirder. Sometimes when I'm wearing the watch, I feel the cold sensation on my wrist, even on a sweltering hot day. In nights while I study late night, occasionally I hear faint whispers, especially when I'm in a quiet room. It's never clear words, just a murmuring. The watch has a peculiar way of catching my attention, almost like it wants me to wear it on certain days. And then he goes on to ask, has anyone else experienced something similar with an antique item? I'd love to hear your thoughts, what might be happening, or how I can connect more with this spirit without inviting any negative energy. Very important point that, I think. He says, things to add up. I see this figure in polyester clothing, and a sudden smell of fruity cocktail and smoke fills up the room while I'm sleeping alone at night. One encounter, the figure talked to me saying, kid, you have something I showed off with pride. Don't go the path I went. I'll ensure you don't. It's a kind of protective soul, I guess.
Does he have any evidence that that guy was wearing a watch?
No, as far as I could tell from my research of it, he literally went, my watch was made in 1972, was a gangster killed in a discotheque. That's about as far as...
Right,
so,
okay.
I mean, it's quite a loose connection, I guess. Yes, so interesting story, though. I liked, a couple of bits I liked were, very vivid encounters. And if you see the watch... I mean, it just looks like something you would wear to a 70s disco if you had a bit of money. It's just hilarious. And I like this idea that somehow it's protecting him. So, yeah, we've had this cursed watch sold on eBay, and this man whose antique watch came with a guardian angel in the shape of a gangster. What more do you want?
Yeah, no, I like that. And it does make sense. Like, we know from many different stories that people can imprint themselves or leave something of themselves in an object. It makes sense that an object that is largely attached to you most of the time soaks up those things. So which does sort of beg the question of whether you should buy and wear second-hand watches, because you never know what you might pick up.
Well, also, and I had a little think of it. There's a little bit I'm going to get onto in a minute, but I was thinking, what are you imprinting into your own watches that could be there for a future generation? We'll come on to that. But we couldn't do an episode on haunted horology, Ben, without some stories about grandfather clocks. Could we not?
No.
I mean, it's hard to imagine a haunted house, especially a Gothic one, that doesn't have a creepy grandfather clock that chimes.
That's right. 30 East Drive has a grandfather clock right at the top of the stairs.
Oh, does it?
That's largely every piece of filming that anybody does.
Okay.
Up the stairs, it's always standing, I think, to the right of it.
Right.
And you're right. They do have a special place in. Like, if Scooby goes into a haunted mansion, there's always a clock.
Yeah.
There.
I've got this article that kind of goes into, makes a really good point of why that might be the case. It's really obvious, but it's really good. So, yes, this article was from, I love this, Haunted Mansions blog. Love that blog.
There's a blog for everything.
There really is. They talk about these spooky timepieces. They write, the first thing to say is that there has always been something vaguely unsettling about grandfather clocks. They're about the same height and girth as a human being. they have a face. I think that's very important, don't you think?
They do have a face. I'm going to put my hand up and go girth. I'm not sure, but yes.
For centuries, the clock was by far the most complex piece of machinery most people knew. The closest thing to artificial intelligence. I think that's pushing it a little bit, but I get what he's saying.
Yeah.
Long before radio and robots, it was the clock that seemed eerily human. I'm not sure the radio feels eerily human. I guess human voice. Okay, I'm going with him. It's never taken very much to anthropomorphise grandfather clocks in odd or whimsical or even sinister directions. The cultural hangover continues into our own time. Grandfather clocks have been standard prop in scary movies as long as they've been making scary movies. They're right up there with the suit of armour when it comes to creepy things standing around in dark old houses.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, the blog goes on to highlight readers' stories of their haunted clocks. They're not all grandfather clocks, but there is one at the end. But there's some really good stories here. So, and I'll come on to a little bit more of what you were talking about, kind of, you know, are these watches and clocks collecting some kind of thing from an entity, a spirit, whatever. So the first story features a clock that seems to have been haunted by someone's departed mother. They write, "On our first wedding anniversary, my parents gave us an anniversary clock. Not expensive, but I loved it. I kept perfect time for years. Mum passed in 1990. After a few years, it stopped, and changing batteries didn't help. Because I loved it and it meant something to me, I kept it on the mantle. When we moved, the clock went with us, and it had its place of honour on our new mantle. But it was quiet and the pendulum didn't move. Until one evening when my husband and I sat in the kitchen, the clock chimed. Looking at each other, we went to the clock, but it clearly wasn't working." That really reminded me of, you remember the music box when we were
Yes.
at Shepton? Puzzled, we forgot about it. Interesting this. Later that evening, my son was in a minor auto accident.
Oh, that's interesting.
Over the years, the clock chimed randomly, always announcing something. Not always bad, most of the time good. It got to the point that when it chimed, I would say, "Hi, Mum." On January the 6th, 2012, my dad passed away. Dad was a major do-it-yourself handyman. There was nothing he couldn't fix. The clock still randomly chimed until then. But after a week after he was buried, we sat in the kitchen talking about him over a glass of wine. And damn, the clock chimed at 10:59 p.m. The next day, while dusting the mantle, I freaked out. The pendulum was spinning and the hands were keeping time.
Oh, wow, he'd fixed it.
Yep. While it doesn't chime every hour, when it does, it is usually at night and always at 1 minute to the hour. I guess Dad is still working on fixing it. She says, "Between the random chimes, I have a connection to my parents, who I miss tremendously. The clock stays as is."
See, that reminds me of what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago in terms of the fragmentation of the consciousness and the attachments. And we were talking about attachments to humans, but I wonder whether attachments to objects as well happens, because I do find it sort of too far of a reach to expect that their dead mother is hanging around next to that clock and she's waiting. And she's like, "Oh, right, Dave, he's going to have a minor auto accident.
Yeah, I'll do the chime.
I'll do the chime."
Yeah, it is odd.
It feels like maybe some part of her, maybe the family protection part rather than the timekeeping part. And it attaches to the clock because there's a way of doing something. There's a way of like dinging and sort of they'll work this out. It's very interesting. I like that. I like that idea.
And it was obviously a battery-operated quartz watch, so having it start up again after a long period of time is quite interesting. Well, here's another story, Ben. They say, "My cousin Jerry passed away 2 years ago in September. Her brother cared for her and was very good to her until she died. Well, just a few months later, our families all got together for Thanksgiving at the brother's house. Dinner was on the table and Jerry's brother gave a toast to Jerry and we all raised our glasses to her. He said some really sweet things about his sister and what we were all missing her and wishing she was here with us. Suddenly, a clock on the buffet started chiming. The brother stood up with a really funny look on his face and then told us this. The clock had not worked in over a year. It was sent to a repair shop but could not be fixed. It just started working right after our little toast, and it works to this day. So it must be that our loved ones can somehow communicate to us through clocks. I truly believe this, they say. And Ben, this story is in a similar vein. Many years ago, on our first anniversary, my husband bought me an anniversary clock with a chime. It stopped working, she says, which seems quite right. They always seem to stop working, no matter who owns them. And we took it to the clock repairman, but he couldn't get it repaired. I left it in our house, always in a place of honour, so everyone could see it. It's a really beautiful thing. My husband died 5 years ago. A few months after he died, I was still missing him, and the clock began chiming. It was on what would have been our 54th wedding anniversary. The clock now works and keeps good time. I can't explain it, but I know what I want to believe.
Yeah, I think that is what you want to believe, and it's perfectly fine. It's nice. I do sort of... in my mind, this also has a crossover with phone calls from the dead. That idea, because quite a lot of those instances of phone calls from the dead, the telephones are disconnected from the actual telephone system. And in the older cases, it is the old pick up receiver and turn the dial phones.
Yeah.
And the first sign of any activity coming through is a dinging of the mechanical ringer in those phones.
Yeah.
So I wonder whether there is some kind of... it's not necessarily an attachment to the clock, it's the mechanism, it's the ability to make a noise with minimum effort, because both the telephone and the clock were designed that it wouldn't require an enormous amount of energy to make that noise. Yeah.
And I think from these clocks, the last three stories, seem to me that they are quartz battery operated clocks. So you could see an argument where a battery may start working again, or, temperature conditions. I think it's much harder when you have a mechanical or a clock that you need to wind yourself. And the next story does have that, and it is a grandfather clock.
Just before you leave the watches, this is a story, or the timepieces with batteries. Yeah, it's a story I've told before, but it was a long time ago, and it's pertinent now. But in the early days of Uri Geller becoming famous in the 80s, he used to go on my dad's radio show and TV show quite a lot. And there was one day when they were going to do an experiment to get people's watches working. That's a fairly standard thing that Uri Geller did. Yeah. And if you remember, what he gets people to do is hold the watch in their hand and shout, "Work, work," at it. Yeah. And really the conventional explanation is that the heat of your hand and the movement of your hand around it will bring an old battery back to life to just sort of tick for a few seconds more. Right. And it looks like a great magic trick. Oh, sorry, a great sort of psychology trick, whatever it is. I was probably about 8 at the time, and we did have a watch in our house. So it was my mum's Swatch watch, and she had broken it by taking it swimming. She thought it was waterproof, and it wasn't. Right. And in those days, they used to have a battery case on the back, which you could take off using a screwdriver. I don't know if you remember those. It had a little sort of divot in it. Yep. And anyway,
I've still got a Swatch watch that has one of those. An old one, yeah.
So you know that the only thing behind it is the battery. Yeah. And me and my mum, we were at home. My dad was at the radio station, obviously, but I wanted to listen to this, so we were in the living room. I was about 8, and my mum was holding the watch, and she was playing along, going work, work. And then she opened her hand. She was like, oh, she sort of yelped a little bit. So, oh, that's strange. And she dropped the watch down onto the settee where she was sitting. And the back of the watch had come off. And she said, "Oh no, I've lost the back. How on earth did that happen?" And so we sat around looking for it everywhere. And not only it was the back, but it was the battery as well. And we thought it had fallen between the cushions, and we looked everywhere. And obviously Mum was also concerned because my sister was a baby at the time. She doesn't want a baby picking up and eating a watch battery. We couldn't find it anywhere. Well, that was until the weekend when my mum was downstairs. So it was an upside down house. So we lived upstairs and the bedrooms were downstairs, but there was an under stair cupboard, which there was no way you could get into. And in that under the stair cupboard was stored the vacuum cleaner. For the first time that week, the vacuum cleaner was taken out. Balanced on top of the vacuum cleaner was the back of the Swatch watch and the battery. And when inserted back into the watch, it began ticking again. Oh, wow. And it's one of those family stories that my dad's like, oh yeah, well, somebody just picked it up and put it there. I'm like, Dad, who would have put it on top of the vacuum? There's only the three of us who are like not babies. So it's got no good explanation. But I love that idea that the battery somehow transferred itself downstairs into the cupboard.
And did it work after that?
It did work after that.
It wasn't like only worked for a day or two.
I was going to say to you. So to this day, it still has a battery in it.
Really?
And it's still in my mum's drawer. My mum uses it very, very occasionally. Yes, wow. I know.
That's incredible. Well, let's get on to something bigger than a watch. This next story is very gothic horror. It's a grandfather clock that seems to be obsessed with the wishes of the dead. So the owner of this clock picks up the story. They say, I am the fourth owner of a grandfather clock that was first purchased by my grandmother's brother approximately 100 years ago. Great Uncle Telemac, what a great name.
That's a fantastic name.
He was a man of wealth who could neither read nor write, but went on to start one of the largest insurance companies to date. When he passed away, the great clock stopped. So we've had this before.
Yeah.
And no amount of coaxing would get it to start again. It sat in the dining room of his house in Montreal, Quebec, and when the family was gathered around the dining room table to hear the reading of the will, the clock started again.
Brilliant.
With no outside influence. The clock is a 7-foot-tall unit that has a series of 3 weights that have to be pulled up by chains to wind it up. So again, if we talk about the battery thing, it's not like it would have, suddenly had a
bit of charge. Yeah.
When my grandmother, Blanche, died, it again stopped working and would not start. My mother was given the clock by her sister and had the clock shipped 1,000 miles to her house. For weeks the clock would not run, and then she received a copy of her mother's will in the mail, and the clock started again.
That's very good.
She said, I was living with my mother at the time, and we had gone to town. We found the copy of the will in the mailbox, and when we went into the house, we found the clock running. When my mother passed on, the clock struck 13 and would stop and run in spurts. The clock thus far has been behaving itself with no other episodes.
Striking 13 is interesting because it obviously wasn't designed to do that.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of stories about striking 13. But I thought it was fascinating, the reading of the will. There's almost something. I mean, if you go with, going into the light, it's almost like I'm not able to move on until that's all sorted. Now everything's sorted, I can go. It almost felt like.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Sort of embodying the spirit of the person who was. It just feels like they've sort of imparted some of themselves to this thing that was they looked at every day, probably 20 times.
Well, it's funny you say that because that's what I want to get onto now. Because I find it interesting that these stories all seem connected to the person who owned it. Now, we've talked a lot over the last few weeks about the idea of trickster spirits, some kind of entity or energy coming through in Ouija boards and other ways. That's not what it seems. But when it comes to watches and clocks, if they do carry something paranormal, they seem to get their energy from the person, I guess, who owned it, wore it, wound its mechanism. That's what it seems to me in these stories. And that got me thinking about my relationship with my watch. So I bought my watch 20 years ago when I got an unexpected bonus at work, and I thought, like many people do, I thought I'd treat myself. So for the last 20 years, Ben, I've pretty much worn it on my wrist every day. I guess it's become a kind of extension of my body, but I think my relationship with it goes much deeper. So my watch has an automatic movement, which means the movement of my arm and wrist powers it, right? So I don't need to wind it. It's just my movement. So my movements literally power its movement. Like a symbiotic relationship, really. My body movement gives it life and it repays me by telling me the time, right? If you think of it that way.
Yeah.
Now, we often talk about the paranormal in terms of energy. I mean, just think how much of my energy has been absorbed into this watch. It could not function without my energy. Without it, it would die. And for the last 20 years, I've been putting my energy into this thing on my wrist.
That's going to be haunted.
But it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. I never thought of it that way.
So I just thought if ghosts and hauntings are related to energy, then I guess the watch is a pretty good candidate to be a vessel for.
Yeah,
right?
It's literally been capturing your... Well, it's your kinetic energy, but more than that, I would imagine.
Yeah. It's just a thing that's just struck me when I was thinking.
Yeah.
I'd never really thought about this symbiotic relationship between me and my watch, but it really struck me while I was doing this.
Well, interesting, in the last story, you pointed out that grandfather clock, you had to lift the weights to power it.
Yeah.
Similar thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess most watch enthusiasts are likely to say that they have a special relationship with their watch, even if it's not paranormal. But for some people, Ben, that extends to their watch literally saving their lives. So like a silver pocket watch that belonged to Corporal Walter Davis, who served on the Western Front in France during World War One. The 22-year-old soldier joined the 9th Battalion, North Staffordshire Regiment in 1915. Now, he was in the thick of the action during the Battle of the Somme. During the fight, Corporal Davis took a bullet to the chest. But thanks to his solid silver pocket watch, he survived. The bullet hit the watch between 10 and 12, the 10 and 12 part of the dial, shattering it and leaving a bullet ident. We'll put a picture of that in the Facebook, because literally his watch saved his life. I mean, there's other stories of solid pocket watches saving soldiers' lives. But with timepieces moving to the wrist and getting smaller, I guess compared to a pocket watch at least, the firepower involved in modern warfare, you would assume that these stories no longer exist, right? It seems very unlikely. Well, there is an incredible story of Colonel Smith. This decorated soldier had seen many tours of Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, Colonel Smith would always wear his treasured Rolex Submariner watch, and he was wearing it on October the 26th, 2008, when he and his men came under heavy fire. A rocket-propelled grenade hit a building next to him. I mean, he was seriously injured. He suffered 70% burns and a head injury from a piece of concrete that was blasted off the building. Another attack came in, and he instinctively raised his arm to protect his head from a second piece of flying concrete. Even though he was in such a state, he just instinctively did it. Incredibly, his Rolex took the impact of this second piece of debris, saving him from a fatal head injury that would have killed him, definitely. Yeah. So, it happens in modern warfare as well.
Right.
But perhaps the most amazing example of a timepiece saving someone's life took place about 300 years ago. It involves a man called John Taylor, who was a soldier at Windsor. He was accused of sleeping while on watch. Now, Ben, in the 1700s, this was an offence punishable by death, believe it or not.
I would never have survived.
I'd have been gone. And he was sentenced to death. As part of his defence, he claimed that he had not been asleep, as he had heard St Paul's bells chime 13 times in the early hours of the morning. The court dismissed this. Firstly, St Paul's was 24 miles away, and secondly, why would it chime 13 times in the early hours? As he waited for his death sentence to be carried out, a number of witnesses who had heard about the case came forward to testify that indeed St Paul's clock had chimed 13 times on the night due to a technical error.
Wow, so that got him off?
Yep, that saved his life in the nick of time. Yep, he was saved from certain death by a clock chiming unlucky 13.
Goodness me. I mean, to have even known what he was listening to, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that sound travelling 24, he must have good hearing.
Yeah.
Although it's probably quieter in those days, but
Well,
still.
not so many planes going over.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good story.
That's a great story, isn't it? Well, there is no doubt, Ben, that watch enthusiasts and watchmakers are a strange breed. So I want to end with a story that isn't paranormal, but goes some way to highlight how the obsession takes hold. You gave us a little bit of bed there, didn't you?
Sorry.
It's all right. This story is about an eccentric watchmaker called George Daniels. Now, this story hit the newspapers in 1976. It reads, although we've gotten used to prices inflating at an ever-growing pace, it will shock you to hear that a London watchmaker, George Daniels, is selling his watches for $30,000 a piece. So just give some context to that. Ben, by comparison, in the 1970s, a high-end Rolex watch was selling for about $5,000.
Wow.
And he's selling his for 30.
30, yeah.
Mr. Daniels makes each watch entirely by hand, producing one piece a year in 18-karat gold cases that he also himself manufactures. So he made everything of this watch. Today, Mr. Daniels has produced 10 watches in his lifetime. And even at $30,000, not everyone is allowed to purchase one of his creations. The customer has to justify himself as a true collector and horological savant to George Daniels, as the master is demanding not only of his own work, but his clientele as well. Of the 10 watches Mr. Daniels has thus far sold 6, 2 to an American and 4 to English collectors. Of the 4 remaining pieces, he gifted 1 to his 10-year-old daughter, Sarah, and 3 he's kept for himself. According to George Daniels, Aristotle Onassis, the Greek ex-shipping magnate and husband of Jackie Kennedy, wanted to buy one of his watches and offered him the sum of $60,000, but Mr. Daniels denied him. He says, Onassis was not a collector and was not a savant of watchmaking, and so he was not worthy of that special watch, George Daniels told reporters in an interview.
I admire his candour, I suppose.
Yeah.
And those must be worth an absolute fortune now.
We're going to get onto that. But, someone who did own a Daniels watch was a guy called Sam Bloomfield, who was a collector from Palm Springs. So he obviously passed the test. I think that guy owned about 200 pocket and wristwatches. Another famous person he turned down, he said, for a time, Howard Hughes, the quiet billionaire, also wanted to purchase one of my watches, but I refused selling to him. Hughes was not a watch expert, just an eccentric. And to eccentrics, I do not sell my watches. The piece says, George Daniels, who is the most eccentric among all eccentrics out there, that's what he told reporters. I don't sell my watches to eccentrics. Well, Ben, that article was from 1976. So George Daniels passed away in 2011, aged 85. He got a CBE for his dedication to watchmaking. His total life work consisted of making only 37 watches.
Good grief. And he kept a number of them.
Yeah. So if you want to buy one of the rarer ones today, it will now set you back £4 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
One a year.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining, like, it's November. I need to hurry up. I started this in January. The sheer patience and time that went into that. Because I guess from what you were describing there, he is casting every tiny wheel and
making every bit of the watch, including the case, by hand. Goodness me. Yeah, and then keeping 4 out of the 10 that he'd made in the 70s. I'm not letting them go.
No, that's
nice
the thing.
To give one to his family as well. I think when he died, I don't know how he got it, whether it was just from the sale of watches or other stuff. I think he had a £20 million estate, and from my reading, he gave most of it away to charity.
Oh, a nice guy in the end.
Yeah. Well, Ben, Yeah, watches. I really enjoyed doing that because I do like watches, and it was fun. And there'll be lots of pictures on Facebook because obviously I started searching all these really expensive and weird watches. So we'll put a little photo album together. I mean, there is a connection with watches, timepieces, missing time, stopwatches and clocks in relation to UFO encounters. But in my researching of this and my work on it, I feel that's a slightly different phenomena. But we're going to take a look at that in our Patreon exclusive show, Ben and Peter's Extra Scoop. So if you go to patreon.com/TQM pod or click the link in the show notes to get access to how all this relates to the UFO phenomena.
Oh, that's pretty. I didn't realise there was a relationship with the UFO phenomena. I was going to say to you that we should really play out, but I don't know what the copyright is with that nursery rhyme, My Grandfather's Clock, because
maybe you can sing it.
I won't sing it because it's terrible. But the words.
How does it go?
So my grandfather's clock was too tall for the shelf, so it stood, I think, 80 years on the floor. But there's a particular part of the rhyme which says, but it stopped dead, never to go again when the old man died. And it also talks about how he and the old man weighed the same, because it says, and he weighed not a pennyweight more. So this obviously is deeply ingrained in people's psyche that when a clock or a watch stops, this happens. And I do also, what I really like are not just grandfather clocks, but cuckoo clocks and also weather telling clocks. I really appreciate the sophistication of them. But I think second to grandfather clocks in terms of spooky timepieces, I think cuckoo clocks as well, because...
do you remember we had that EVP when we did we didn't get it, but it was played to us, that EVP of a cuckoo clock in an office, wasn't it? Yeah.
That's right, but there was no cuckoo clock. Yeah. That's why I think they're so peculiar, because they have this ability. So my mother had one, again, when I was growing up, not when I was a teenager, when I was a much younger child. And you know how you get phantom buzzing in your pocket when you think your phone's going off? You'd just be doing something random, and then you'd hear this cuckoo clock and you'd think, oh, it must be like 3 o'clock or something. But it's not. It's like 2 o'clock or 2:30. The clock hasn't gone off. You just imagine it, because this thing goes off so often.
Right, you almost hear it.
You hear this cuckoo, cuckoo in your head all the time. And it used to drive me mad. And there's nothing worse than going to bed and you hear the cuckoo clock, and then you're like, right, I better get some sleep. And then you hear it again, and oh, great, a whole hour's gone past because the flipping cuckoo's gone off again.
Right. I did a little DJ mix for myself of KLF trance tunes the other week, and I keep hearing that when I'm not listening to it. It's obviously just got in my head. I'll be in the car and I'll go, I can hear What Time Is Love? What's going on? And it's like, no, it's not playing. So, yeah, maybe that's the same phenomena. Well, come and join us at Ben and Peter's Extra Scoop, and we'll be talking about UFOs and alien encounters in relation to time, watches and clocks.
Marvellous. And I've got something very spooky from... China's history, something that you won't have even thought of, I doubt. A couple of very peculiar books that I've been studying, and I'll be bringing those to you next week.
Good. One before we go, just one last request, because we have a few reviews recently of just people who've found us completely by accident and have been very complimentary about what we do. So if you are listening to this and you think you know somebody who would like what we do, just let them know.
Yeah, that would be really rather wonderful. Thank you. Cool. Marketing these podcasts, very, very hard.
Yeah, and we're not the best at it, really.
No, not really.
Okay, good. We'll see you next time.
Thank you very much. See you next time.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Are you the quantum mechanics?